Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Graduate Meteorologist Program Information Session for 2025. Before we begin proceedings, I'd just like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways that we are gathered on in all states and territories across Australia. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders joining us today. Next slide, please. My name's Jeremy, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we start, there are a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to cover off on. This webinar is being conducted from locations across the country, so please keep this in mind if we do encounter any technical issues. Shouldn't, but just in case, please just keep that in mind. The session will run for about 60 minutes, and we've got plenty of time allocated to answer your questions. This webinar will also be recorded, and the video will be shared with you via email. We'll also post a link to that up on our webpage for those of you who aren't able to make it. Next slide, thanks. If you haven't attended a webinar with us before, there are some helpful tips on your screen regarding our Q&A function. So if you click on this icon, you can send through any questions or feedback for our presenters during the session. We'll answer as many questions as we can during the allotted breaks. So thank you to everyone who's already sent in questions during our registration process. We've used those questions to help shape today's content. So to start things off, I'll actually hand over to Tim Abrahams, who's the General Manager of our Organisational Development area. All yours, Tim.
Thanks, Jeremy, and hi everybody that's taken the time to join us this afternoon. It's my great pleasure to provide some opening remarks for today's session. I'm the Senior Responsible Officer here in the Bureau of Meteorology for the Grad Met program. And just to lay some foundation comments before I pass back to Jeremy, the Bureau of Meteorology is in its 117th year as a national weather agency. We commenced back in 1908. And this year's graduate cohort is actually our 71st cohort that has gone through the program. So if you're successful through the recruitment process for next year's program, you will join part of the 72nd cohort through the program. So what that means is over the course of time, we've trained hundreds of meteorologists that have worked at the Bureau. You'll have the opportunity today to hear from a number of our esteemed alumni, one who's very recognisable on our news quite often. So I'll let Grace and Miriam later in the session take you through what life is like on program, but also what some of the opportunities look like post-program as well. And hopefully that will spark some further engagement, your interest in the program, and we'll see an application from you during the recruitment process. So I'll leave my comments there, Jeremy, and pass back. But again, thank you for joining us today and appreciate your engagement and questions as we go through the session.
Thanks very much, Tim. So next up, I'm delighted to introduce you to today's speakers. So first, we'll hear from Dr. Mick Pope. Mick's the manager of the graduate program, who's had a long-standing career at the Bureau. And in particular, he's been leading our graduate diploma in meteorology for a while now. Then we'll hear from Grace Abbott. So Grace completed the graduate diploma at the end of 2023 and is currently working as a decision support meteorologist in Perth. Prior to joining the Bureau, Grace found a love for science through her astrophysics studies in Hobart. She's also someone that a few of you may recognise, having been the face of our program for the last couple of years. Then we'll hear from Miriam Bradbury, who's the lead meteorologist working in our community information team. Miriam and her team are responsible for the Bureau's radio, video, TV, and social media weather content. She's passionate about helping the Australian community navigate the challenges of severe weather, such as fires, floods, cyclones, and storms. And as Tim said, she's probably quite recognisable, having been on many of our video and radio broadcasts. Next slide, please. We'll also hear from Roland Wilson, who will be discussing our affirmative measures and the diversity aspects of applying for the program, and including the supports available to you. Last but not least, we've also got some of our staff working in the background, Marg, Tim, Mitzi, and Sarah, who will be answering your questions in the Q&A function. Next slide, please. Now, it's a fairly full hour, so we'll be giving you an overview of the Graduate Meteorologist program, including learning about the course, the career outcomes for graduates, and obviously how to apply. You'll also hear from our meteorologists about what they do and where Meteorologist has taken them. Finally, there'll be 2 sessions throughout the webinar that will be discussing your questions, both the ones that you sent in during registration and then the ones that you put in the Q&A function. If you do have any questions, please put them into the Q&A at any time. We'll be answering them in the Q&A itself, and then we'll also try to answer as many as we can on screen. For now, I'll hand over to Mick.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone out there who's attending this webinar today or who will watch it in due course. As you've heard already, my name is Dr. Mick Pope. I am the Manager of Meteorologist Initial Training, which is the section of the Bureau of Meteorology Training Centre responsible for the delivery of the Graduate MET program. I joined the Bureau in 1997, which makes me quite old, and I came into the organisation with undergraduate degree in applied mathematics and a master's degree in physics, with a little bit of meteorology in my background. After completing the course, I spent 3 years working in the Sydney Regional Forecasting Centre, which was the old model of operations of the Bureau. I spent some time in Darwin, including supporting an international experiment. Spent a little bit of time on national security bases, on a RAAF base, but the bulk of my career in the Bureau has been in the training centre. And I actually think I have the best job in the Bureau. Why do I say that? Because I get to recruit and train graduate meteorologists and then see them flourish in their careers, run into them down the track and see how they've developed. So I'm really excited to hear this afternoon about both Grace and Miriam's careers since leaving, because they're former students of mine. My own experience with the Bureau was fairly dramatic at times. So there's a slide that shows the Sydney April 14 hailstorm from, is it 1998 or 1999? I can't remember now, but at the time it was the largest insurance payout in Australian history for a weather-related event. And the image on the left is a radar image. If you're successful on course, you'll learn how to interpret these. And the expert eye can see that there's a high precipitation supercell which is delivering hailstones, as you can see them on the right. And you can see they range in shape from more or less spherical to shapes of very clearly smaller hailstones sticking together to produce cricket ball size hail, which went through people's roofs and through their car panels and windows. That experience, of course, continued to inspire the love and wonder of the weather that I have to this day. But it also reminded me that this meteorological phenomena has real-world impacts. We pride ourselves in the Bureau of Meteorology as in adding impact and value to the Australian community. And so it's this kind of phenomena that motivates me to train, recruit and train graduates to the highest order and to send them out to take the knowledge that they acquire on this course to provide expert advice and products and services to customers out there. So that's a little bit about me. What about the program? What will your career journey look like? Well, stage 1, or stage 0, if you like, is right now. It's you thinking about, do I want to apply, going through the interview process. And if you're successful, you'll join us here at Broadmeadows at our dedicated training facility with my dedicated team in January of next year for a 10-month program. 3 11-week units going through the content that's required by the World Met Organization, and then an 8-week job preparedness unit where you'll get to get your hands dirty in a forecast simulation. Once you successfully graduate from that course, you'll go into job readiness training at our operational centres, which are Australia-wide, but are particularly focused in Melbourne and Brisbane. So you'll be apprenticed or drilled by more experienced forecasters that will take you through the ropes, and then you'll be signed off as competent, ready to go solo. But you're never alone, and from then on in, you'll be working in operational forecasting, closely supervised, with more on-the-job training as required and the ability to rotate through other parts of the business as your desire takes you. I like to say to graduates as they leave us, you are captains of your own career. So if there's an opportunity to move about, take it. Just a little bit about what we do. Lovely little document I encourage you to read. It's short and sweet. It's the Meteorology Act of 1955, and it points out the fact that the Director of Meteorology, also known as the CEO, has the ability to direct that we provide training for meteorologists. So BMTC exists as part of a government act. But we have a bunch of connections with the wider world. The World Meteorological Organization sets out the learning outcomes that such a program can deliver. And so training with us ensures that you could work anywhere on the globe if you wanted. We are accredited by TEXA and CRICOS, which means we provide tertiary level qualification, both for domestic students who are Bureau employees and Australian citizens, but also for those from outside our partner agencies and our custom agencies, such as the Royal Australian Navy and overseas Met agencies. And we collaborate with other agencies to deliver training material, to develop it, and to run our program. Your career pathways, of course, are quite diverse, much more broad than when I joined the Bureau many years ago now. You'll hear about various aspects of this as Miriam and Grace speak to you later, but community services is the part of the Bureau that delivers the public forecasts and warnings. It's split into three functions. So the national production, who produce the actual forecasts, environmental prediction, who issue warnings for things like tropical cyclones and the hailstorm that I showed you earlier, fire weather, and so on. And then decision support services, who work really closely with our customers. The aviation industry is a major user of our data, both civil and general aviation, and you can expect to work on a 24/7 shift work roster with them to provide the services the weather services that they need to make planning decisions on when they can fly, when they can land and take off, and so on. As I indicated earlier, I've got a little bit of experience working on an Air Force base. We partner very closely with National Security in providing forecasts products with them for Navy, Air Force, and Army. And finally, the energy and resource sector, which is a growing area where we provide specialised forecasts for the mining industry, for the fossil fuel and renewable energy industries. So there's a number of different ways in which you can specialise, of course. And you'll hear through the year, and you'll have input from the various operational areas. They'll tell you about what it is they're doing. And we're continuing to finally hone our teaching program so that you're exposed to these sorts of end users. Because as I said earlier, we're not just about providing you with meteorological knowledge and skills, but also giving you a real sharp customer focus. That's what we're looking for in our grads, which segues really nicely into this slide that talks about the things we're looking for. The right stuff for a forecast meteorologist is, yes, of course, having the right academic marks, which I'll touch on another slide, or maybe I don't. So let me state it up front. First year physics and second year applied mathematics to a credit level. And in addition to those skills, you need to have a customer focus to be able to build trust and engage in close relationships, to connect with our customers, to understand their needs. And that's all embodied in upholding our service charter. So any experience you have in working in hospitality or retail, wherever you've got somebody who needs a service and you've provided it, you can illustrate how you align your skill set to that. Collaboration, we are a trusted partner with many agencies. We seek to build productive relationships within our teams, within our service-oriented teams, and with our customers. And we seek to embody a growth mindset. It doesn't say no, but says yes, maybe, but what does that require? So always looking for ways to improve our services. Decision-making is a key skill, both in terms of those that we empower to make those decisions. So hearing the customer voice is essential to know what kind of decisions that they're making. But also you need to be able to solve problems and think critically and identify risks in a really timely fashion. So we're talking on timescales of seconds to minutes to even hours. It's a really time-pressured environment, but it's really rewarding in the ways in which you can support others to make the decisions they need on the timescales they need to make them. And then finally, one of the things that I really love about this organisation is the Bureau Way. The purpose and values and behaviours that we share and we uphold every day, about people being able to come to this workplace feeling safe, feeling valued and respected, and feeling they can bring their whole selves to the workplace. So if you've got experience of embodying those values, if you can demonstrate the ways in which you embody the principles of fairness and justice and transparency, and the way in which you treat others with respect, then you can apply. Here's some more specifics now. Eligibility, Australian citizenship, as I said earlier, an undergraduate or postgraduate degree in science or engineering or a related field, with the relevant studies in physics, and that equates to first-year physics and an engineering or a science degree, with applied mathematics to second-year level. So if you've got vector calculus and partial differential equations that you've covered in your courses, then you tick the box. Applications are open now and close on Sunday, the 4th of May. The employment type is full-time and ongoing, so you're actually paid to study. You don't need to work part-time. You can't study part-time. It's your full-time employment for the first 10 months of your role with the Bureau to come join us on the program. You'll be located here at BMTC, and after the course, likely to be relocated to Melbourne or Brisbane, but there are opportunities in other capital cities. Note that relocation is paid for by the Bureau. The study is full-time, it's 10 months. We do have the kind of flexible type working environment under our EA, where you can expect to do some remote learning from home. But we really do value the time that we spend together to build those relationships of trust amongst your peers and to facilitate peer-to-peer learning, but also to be able to come and speak to staff for the support. And when we run practicals and tutorials, you're expected to be at work. But there is that flexibility, and the lectures are recorded. And after the course, it's full-time working shift. It can include working night shift on the 24/7 roster. It depends what part of the business you end up. And you can see the salary there, 64,169 plus 15.4% superannuation. And as soon as you leave the course, you get advanced to broadband level 2 with increments as you go on and shift penalties when you work them. Here's the recruitment process. So scan that QR now, but we're in the application submitting phase at the minute where you will supply your CV plus academic transcript, and one of the first stages is me evaluating that you have the right quals in that academic transcript and the marks required. There will be an online assessment piece coming up in May, and then a virtual candidate assessment centre with online psychometric testing, group-based and individual assessment activities, and online behavioural interviews. So you'll see me or some of my staff on the other end of a Teams call. Then in June, there's the usual pre-employment screening, so character reference checks and a national police check. You are going to become a Commonwealth employee, so it's important that that's done and have access to our computer systems, and et cetera, et cetera. And then an employment offer will go out in June through August. There'll be a verbal offer from the recruitment agency, and then you'll get a formal written offer from us. And then between August and January, there'll be a number of activities that we'll run just to keep in touch, to provide you with some information about parts of the Bureau, just to see how you're going. And if we can, arrange a visit on site wherever you are. And then, as indicated earlier, in January 2026, there'll be an onboarding phase. There'll be a week of orientation. There'll be ongoing corporate induction activities, and then you'll get to the meat of the course itself. So I believe at this point, it's back to you, Joe.
Thanks, Mick. Now, this section, we're going to have a brief Q&A about the questions that you primarily asked us during the registration process. We've got a number of fairly similar questions, so we've kind of collated those into the main ones. So Mick, all of these particular questions are for you. So first things first, how's the course actually delivered, and is there an option to study online or remotely from a location other than Melbourne?
Yes, so indicated earlier, we do have a degree of flexibility in terms of having days where you can study from home, but BMTC is based out at Broadmeadows, and we expect people to relocate. So they need to have that flexibility. Likewise, to be relocated to anywhere in Australia after the course, and there's no guarantees that you could be returned to your home state.
Thank you. Next question we've got is the course available part-time or self-paced so that people can work at the same time?
Earlier, there's no requirement to work other than for us. It's part of your employment. It should be pointed out that you come into the organisation on probation. That's 18 months, and the first 10 months is successfully passing the course and then meeting the ongoing job requirements and employment requirements.
Lovely. And we also got quite a few questions about specifics of people trying to come into the program and possible bridging qualifications. The most kind of general one being that someone has a Bachelor of Science, but not necessarily physics. And so there were a lot of questions on, could someone do a bridging program for physics and then be a candidate for the positions?
Absolutely. I've seen this a number of times. People are applying and not quite having the subjects that they needed, so they've gone back to university and studied, say, one unit while working or doing something like that, just to pick up on what they need. So you do need the physics, you do need the mathematics. They're not the things that you do every day in operations, but they are the ways in which we support the development of a conceptual understanding of how the atmosphere works. So absolutely, there are lots of universities that will offer online courses.
Wonderful. And there was one other one. So this is actually from Blake from the Q&A so far. If someone is unsuccessful in applying, are they able to get feedback for this so that they can potentially then apply in a future year?
Absolutely. We highly encourage it for the opportunity to speak. You can end up speaking to myself. Certainly people in the HR team are able to respond to point out areas where maybe that quite have the right academics or your performance at interview. It being such a competitive process, ways in which you can improve your interview skills. So I do recommend anyone between putting in a written application and getting an interview, if you've got opportunity to do some interview coaching, I'd highly recommend it, because it's all about putting your best foot forward and selling yourself.
Wonderful. And speaking of, there is one last one for now before we move on, and that is for people who have been out of uni for a while, is there a time limit on when they have to apply since completing their science or other degree? Is the program still for them?
Really, really good question. We don't have a time limit on that. We do have a lot of people. Indeed, I can think of a couple of names straight off the bat on this year's course who've had established careers and moved across. You will find you might be a little bit rusty when you start, but there's lots of help, lots of assistance on tap from my dedicated teaching team to provide you the support you need. So it's not an impediment at all. We welcome people who've got a lot of work experience under their belts. They make a great contribution to our organisation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we'll now actually hand over to Grace to run us through her first year and a bit as a meteorologist. All yours, Grace.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeremy, and g'day everyone. So my name's Grace and I graduated on the MET course of 2023, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about my experience on the MET course and also what I've been up to for the year and a bit since I finished the course. So we'll jump to the next slide, please. So we'll just start with a quick little bit about me. Look, I do come from a science and more specifically a physics background. So in 2020, I completed my Bachelor of Science majoring in physics from the University of Tasmania. And the following year, I then went on to do honours in astrophysics. And my thesis there was looking at trends in infrared emissions from metal poor stars. And I think at the end of this experience, I decided that a PhD wasn't exactly what I wanted to do with the next few years of my life. So throughout 2022, I continued my job in retail, but I had all my doors open and I was searching for any job science related. I had no desired field or end goal, but it does just so happen that the first thing I applied for was the graduate course of meteorology. And I found out later in 2022 that I'd secured a spot on the course. So therefore, in very early 2023, I packed up all my stuff down in Hobart and I jumped on a plane and I relocated to Melbourne. So throughout 2023, with a few hikes and escapades with my colleagues on the side, I completed the Graduate Diploma of Meteorology. Now, part of the process towards the end of the GradMet program is putting in some preferences and then getting a job throughout Australia in an area of the Bureau. For me, I found out I'd landed a spot over in Perth. So I packed up all my stuff again and I jumped on another plane and I headed out west to begin my role, which is where I still currently am as a decision support meteorologist. Next slide, please. So I'm sure what you really want to hear about is what is the GradMet program like? Well, I'll start by saying that I found the experience very similar to university. So by that, I mean we have courses and they're broken up into 4 units throughout the 10-month course. The last unit of that is a bit of a focus on simulated work experience, but the first 3 units are very much stacked with maybe 5 to 6 courses per unit. So you have a timetable structure. And within that structure, you have time for self-directed study as well, and you would expect some assignments and assessments to be spattered throughout that. So on the course here, on the slides here, I broke down some highlights and some challenges from my time on course. And I think the first one comes with studying in any environment with a bunch of like-minded people is coming away with just many amazing friends. I don't think I can express how valuable these people were and how much they supported me throughout the year. And I'm very proud to say that I've come away with a bunch of lifelong friends who I still talk to this day. The next highlight is finally getting to apply a bunch of these skills that you learn in uni to a field that I then progressed my career into. So coming from physics, that's things like thermodynamics and wave theory and fluid mechanics. So finally applying those to a new field. But for people who didn't quite have that background, there were plenty of resources available to help them along the way. The next one's already been touched on, but being paid to study is amazing. This was the first time in my adult life where I didn't have to work an extra 20 hours a week on top of full-time study to get by. And so I was really grateful to have that extra time back. And with that, I managed to jump into a few community sports and things with my evenings. And final highlight, which I kind of already touched on, is that it's a very familiar structure to university with units exploring a really wide range of meteorology topics. So this is things from how do radars work, how do we interpret the data from weather balloons, through to the theory of how air masses move through the atmosphere and what even is a cold front. And then on to things like how do we format aviation forecasts that go out to our aviation sector. So that really broad range kept me engaged throughout the 10 months and it was just a very interesting experience. And finally, a couple challenges. You probably won't be surprised to hear that from moving away from home and from family can be difficult for anyone moving interstate. Adjusting to a new city was a big change for me. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Hobart's just a little bit smaller than Melbourne. And also for the first couple of weeks over in Melbourne, finding housing was no easy feat, but rest assured we all found places with a couple shared houses amongst us. The final challenge that I've outlined here is that the course content can be difficult. So some of the later courses are probably on par with my honours units that I did. But I think for me, the biggest challenges were early on, the steep learning curve, having never studied any meteorology in my life. That was very steep for me. But for other people, it was perhaps when we started to delve into the weeds of the physics a bit more. But rest assured, we all came from a very broad background and we all managed to help each other out and get through the year together. Next slide, please. So what am I up to now? So like I mentioned, I landed a job in Perth, and that is as a decision support meteorologist. So that means that I am mostly focused on communicating weather information to emergency management partners in WA. So for us, that's the Department of Fire and Emergency Services, also our Parks and Wildlife, which is DBCA. And if you can picture the scenario of a cyclone approaching the coast, we pretty much liaise with any agencies that will be involved in the preparedness phase and also the response phase to that event. So that might include like the Department of Health or Education, any power providers, transport and main roads, and also media. Next slide, please. So what does that look like more on a day-to-day? Well, I do shift work, but I do not work overnight. But some of my specific tasks include writing some broad-scale thunderstorms forecasts for the entire state, and I also cover the Northern Territory too, so there's quite a bit of land to cover there. But from broad scale down to very fine scale, I also get to write incident weather forecasts for prescribed hazard reduction burns. So for example, if Parks and Wildlife are trying to do a burn within a valley, we talk about all the weather effects that will apply to them. I also write a couple emails to some partners in hazardous rock fishing agencies. So those conditions are very common in Western Australia and are a big public safety issue. And I think that goes to outline that not only are we forecasting what's going on the land, but we're also concerned with marine conditions. So for this particular product, we're looking at seas and swell as well. And there's a bunch more on the slide, but I think we might skip forward to the next one to really talk about some of the other opportunities that I've had. So I finished the MET course in November of 2023, and before I'd even made it over to Perth, I headed up to Darwin for a Decision Support Services North and West workshop. So there I got to meet all my colleagues and also discuss what really is Decision Support Services and where is the future of that business unit going. On the left top of the slides here, I've got a beautiful sunset over Darwin, and in the foreground you can see some crocodile warning signs, which was a bit of shock for me coming from Hobart. And then below that on the slides, I've also got me helping represent the Bureau at the Perth Boat Show. So there we were interacting with a lot of very weather savvy mariners about how they consume our products and how they interact with our warnings. Now, on the right, on the top and in the middle is me at our pre-season tour. So ahead of the severe weather season, Decision Support Services will send some people out to the regions to talk about the long-range forecast for their areas. And you can see me in the middle image there pointing to some tropical cyclone tracks with a spatula because I couldn't quite reach the slides. But on the topic of tropical cyclones, my first tropical cyclone crossing occurred earlier this year for the WA coast. So that was Tropical Cyclone Zelia that crossed in mid-February near Port Hedland. And during that event, I got to jump on ABC radio and do hourly emergency broadcasts to people up in that part of the world. I've also managed to complete some time in the National Production Team, which is another team that many people head into off of Metcourse. And they're responsible for all of the public weather products that you see. So when you pull out the app to check the temperature for today or to see what the winds are doing, they're responsible for all the values that you see there. And I've also had plenty of adventures into helping promote the GradMet program. So I hope that's been a pretty good, roughly 10-minute summary of my time with the Bureau. I hope I've given you an idea of what the Met course looks like and also what you might get up to afterwards. So I might hand back to Jeremy with that one. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Grace. And thank you once again for all the help that you have done with the GradMet program. Coming from myself, it's certainly wonderful to have had you working with us. We'll now hand over to Miriam, who's a little bit more advanced in her career and has been wonderful in all of her products. So Miriam, if you could just walk us through some of the pathways that you've had after graduation, that would be great.
Thanks, Jeremy. So hello, everybody. I am Miriam Bradbury and I'm based down in the Bureau's head office in Melbourne. So I am a senior meteorologist, but my role title is a community information lead because bringing information directly to the Australian community is what my current job is all about. Now, mine is only one of the many pathways you can follow through your time at the Bureau, and where exactly you end up will depend on your skill set, your niche area of interest, and of course what the Bureau needs at any given time. A lot of people will switch through a lot of different roles across their course, across their time at the Bureau, and we find that this really helps to round out your skills and keep you capable across a lot of different disciplines. Now, some roles in the Bureau are a direct route from the graduate meteorologist program, but others require some further separate study. For example, if you want to potentially move into the climate team or the space weather team or something like that. My pathway to my current role is a fairly traditional direct progression from the graduate meteorologist program, and it really has been determined by my skill set and my interests. So let me take you through it. So on to the next slide now. Thanks, Mick. Okay, so I completed the GradMet program in 2015, and for me, coming straight from uni, this was a great transition from full-time study to full-time work. And as we've just heard from Grace, it's really fantastic to be learning things which will feed directly into the job you're going to do operationally. It gives you a lot of purpose when you're studying. I actually did an arts science double degree at university. I specialised in atmospheric science, but I also specialised in languages. And I think my interest in languages and communication has really helped guide me to the place I am now with the Bureau. Now, after I graduated from the Met course, I moved into the National Operations Centre, which at that time mainly undertook broad scale forecasting, such as high seas forecasting and upper level aviation forecasting. And I was only there for a very short time, maybe 3 or 4 months, before I moved to the Victorian Regional Office, where I was for the following 6 years. Now, in the Vic Regional Office, I gained a wide array of forecasting experience, from aviation forecasting to public-facing forecasting, severe weather forecasting, including for fire weather and for severe thunderstorms. And I also did a lot of radio media communication at that time. Some of the highlights from my time in the Vic Regional Office include getting to represent the Bureau at the Avalon Air Show. I was able to be a part of the inaugural day of the thunderstorm asthma forecast in Victoria when that service began a few years ago. I also got to do a short-term stint down at the RAF base in East Sale, which was a really cool experience as well, getting to brief pilots in their operations. Now, my time in the Victorian Regional Office gave me an understanding of that local scale forecasting. So in the National Centre, I got the broad scale picture, but in the Victorian Regional Office, I got that local focus, and it really rounded out my skills. But I also realised through my time in the Vic Regional Office that the area of the job I liked the most was not actually the technical and scientific process of piecing a forecast together. What I liked most was talking to people and communicating that forecast. So for me, when an opportunity came up to join the community information team, which was a brand new team that was going to specialise in communication, I jumped at that chance. So on to the next slide now. Thanks, Mick. So in the community information team, we're a mix of meteorologists and science communicators. We're part of the Decision Support Services branch of the Community Services Group, and these big umbrella terms really do tell you what the community information team is all about, though. We help support the decisions of the community. We bring that weather information to everyday Australians so they can make those decisions around their lives and around the severe weather that may impact them. And not just the severe weather, the everyday weather as well. The community information team, we do work 7 days a week. We're based in every state and territory of the country. And we are a national team, but we do deliver information on that very state-based scale as well. On to the next slide now, Mick. So what exactly do we do? Well, if we look at the Bureau, it's comprised of a lot of different specialist forecast teams. We've got teams who focus on thunderstorms and heavy rainfall, teams that focus on fire, heat waves and air quality, tropical cyclones, climate, just to name a few. And we also have teams in each state and territory whose main focus is helping emergency services make decisions, exactly what Grace is doing now, as you've just heard. But in the community information team, we are one of the few teams that deals directly with members of the public, not via a different group like emergency services. We take all of the hard work that's done by all of these other forecasting and specialist teams, and we bring it to everyday Australians in a way that they can understand, because a lot of the time it's really high level language, it's very science entrenched, but it's not necessarily the most accessible to the average person on the street. So to do this work, our team delivers over 400 regular radio crosses each week. We also undertake hundreds of ad hoc interviews that can span from radio, print media to Zoom interviews, and it can be pretty intense, particularly when there's a lot of severe weather around, but it's very rewarding. The senior meteorologists in the team, myself included, undertake national live TV crosses on programs like ABC Breakfast or Sunrise or the Today Show when they say, now we're going to cross to our friends at the Weather Bureau. It's us that they cross to. But we also create severe weather and educational content in the form of videos, animations, social media posts, reels, podcasts, the list goes on. And the job can range from a lot of things, but a few examples would be writing content for the Bureau's Facebook page, to similar to what Grace did during Tropical Cyclone Zelia, delivering those hourly emergency broadcast interviews during those peak events. Our aim is to be there with the community, not just through those big weather events, but also through the everyday weather. If we jump to the next slide now, Mick, thank you. So why exactly did I choose this path, and why did I move my career in this direction? Well, the first reason is communication. I love talking, which probably becomes pretty evident the longer you spend with me. But another aspect of the communication I really enjoy is being able to take that high-level meteorology and make it understandable to everyone. Now, a good example of this would be with severe thunderstorms bringing damaging wind gusts, for example. The Bureau's technical definition for a damaging wind gust is a wind gust above 90 kilometres an hour. But that technical definition doesn't mean a whole lot to everyday people who don't have anything to do with meteorology. So instead of using that technical definition, it's our team's job to say things like winds of this strength might bring down trees or power lines, power outages and dangerous driving conditions are possible. You know, this kind of impact-based messaging, which is actually potentially going to change how people go about their day. And there's a real satisfaction in this role in working out what is most relevant to a community or an individual and focusing the information based on that need and audience. We also get to work really closely with every other team in the Bureau. As I've said, we use all their work and we communicate it all outwards. We really get to connect with the organisation as a whole because we're pulling in that information every day. So it's a great point of connection there. I also really love the creativity that this job involves, and it is a huge element of this role because we really do get to decide how that weather story is told and ensure it makes it across to those who actually need to hear it. And looking forwards, that's going to be a really interesting point for the future as well, as the landscape of social media and communication changes. How we communicate the weather will also change in response to that. I love being connected to the community through this job. We're part of people's everyday lives through radio and TV in particular, and we become part of their routines and they get to know us, which is really, really critical for building trust with the community that we will draw on when there's periods of severe weather, so that people will act when we tell them that there's bad weather coming. It is a huge responsibility, but it's a huge privilege to be so closely connected with the community in this way. And the last aspect I wanted to touch on is that it is a step away from the technical meteorology. Now, having that meteorology background, that technical background, is critical for many aspects of this role because you have to understand exactly what you're talking about in order to communicate it effectively. And for some people, most people, that technical forecasting will be your passion and it will guide your pathway through the Bureau. And I did technical forecasting for 7 years, and while I enjoyed a lot of it, the pressures of sifting through the science are very different to the pressures of communicating the science. And I personally just prefer the latter. On to the next slide now, Mick, the challenges. So some of the key challenges with this role, as any role, it has its share of challenges. It is very high pressured work. Most roles in the Bureau do have periods of high pressure. The community information role is no different. We need to deliver information, and sometimes it's really difficult and really scary information for people with empathy and with clarity. Communities need to know, for example, that the biggest flood on record is going to come their way and houses will be destroyed. But they need to hear that from someone who can show compassion for that situation. It can also be really tiring work being in the communication sphere because you're constantly switched on, you're constantly at the forefront of these severe weather events, and being able to take downtime and separate our work life from our personal life becomes really critical. For example, not watching TV, not listening to the news when we're in the middle of communicating a severe weather event, because that onslaught of information can sometimes be a really heavy burden. This role also requires a lot of agility and quick thinking. Most of our job is delivering live interviews, so we need to be able to process information quickly and not be overwhelmed by tricky questions or the negative sentiment that can sometimes come our way when bad weather hits people hard. So on to the next slide now, Mick, and onto the good parts of this job. Firstly, it is a highly fulfilling role. Most of the roles in the Bureau are extremely fulfilling, I will say. But a lot of the time when you're putting together forecasts and warnings and outlooks, all very important, used by a lot of people. Sometimes though, when you hit send on those forecasts, you may not think again about the audience that those forecasts are going to. It can be sometimes a little bit disconnected. But for us, we can't ever overlook our audience because we're talking to them directly. And this really does make a difference in giving us a real day-to-day satisfaction in the job that we're doing. We also get to do new things every day. You know, we follow the bad weather stories around the country a lot of the time. We're focusing on new weather systems. And we also get to take part in seasonal campaigns, community events and holidays, and that can change how we do our work too. There are a lot of community outreach opportunities in this role as there are in a role like Grace's. The work in this team can be really diverse. Some examples of work that our team has done over the recent months include delivering live interviews from radio station studios, being part of the ABC Live blog during Tropical Cyclone Alfred, writing text that goes with the photos in the bomb weather calendar, and taking part in community festivals and events. So a lot that can be done through this role, as with most roles in the Bureau. So ultimately, being part of the community information team is about building relationships with the public and within the rest of the Bureau and delivering that weather message. And especially if you like the idea of getting your voice out in the community through radio or TV, it is a really cool and fun pathway to follow after the Met course. That's all from me. Thanks for listening. I'll hand back to you now, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Miriam. From here, we'll jump forward a slide and I'll introduce Roland Wilson from our People Solutions team, and he'll be discussing our diversity and inclusion for this particular role. All yours, Roland.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roland Wilson. I'm the First Nations lead for the Bureau, and I work in the People Solutions team. And so that team includes a number of different portfolios. My portfolio, which is the First Nations portfolio, diversity and inclusion, learning and development, and talent and attraction. But I'll be talking to you briefly today about the diversity and inclusion space in the First Nations space. Next slide, please. So the Bureau is an incredibly diverse organisation. And you can see from the slide there's a range of different initiatives that are highlighted there, but we really do have a very diverse workforce, everyone from working mums and dads through to people of all different age groups, culturally and linguistically diverse workforce as well as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employees, and also a range people who identify on the in the LGBTQI plus spaces as well. And I can honestly say that the Bureau is an extremely welcoming and respectful organisation with regards to that incredible range of diversity that we experience within the Bureau. And I can also attest that we do work very hard to create an environment and a space that does respect and meet the needs of everyone within the Bureau as well. We work particularly through the learning and development spaces. We have a whole range of learning and training, particularly for leaders, but the Bureau as a whole, to be able to strengthen our diversity and inclusion measures. And one of the strong ways in which we're doing that currently is through the Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan, which was recently launched by my colleague Tina Marambeliotis, and that is now in operation across the Bureau as well. Can I just jump to the next slide, please? Thanks. So you can see from this slide, on the left-hand side there, you can see the governance structures that underpin the diversity and inclusion action plan there. But what I do want to point out to you are a range of the different networks that are available to you as Bureau employees. So accessibility, particularly for those of you who may have physical needs as part of your work arrangements. Gender equality. So we do have gender equity targets that we want to meet, particularly increasing the number of women who are entering into the Bureau workforce and staying within the Bureau. We have the Indigenous Employee Network, which is for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employees and provides a support network across the continent as well. We have Storm Pride for LGBTQI plus Bureau members, and we also have a multicultural network as well. And one thing that I really wanted to highlight is not only these support networks for all of our staff, but also, in terms of highlighting the diversity and inclusion space. I think one of the things that is really important about a focus in the D&I space for the Bureau is the fact that, by promoting and strengthening diversity and inclusion measures and getting a diverse workforce for the Bureau, is it actually enables the Bureau to be able to reach out into the community as well, because we have such a diverse community across Australia. We are a migrant nation. We are a very culturally and linguistically diverse nation. We have significant touch points into First Nations communities as well. So being able to connect with, communicate with, and support different parts of the Australian community is very important to the Bureau for a whole range of reasons, particularly when it comes to communicating the weather, alerts and warnings, messaging, as well as being able to help communities prepare and respond to significant weather events as they occur. If I can just move to the final slide, please, for my section. Thanks. So in my area in particular, I suppose if there are any people online today who do identify as Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander, please feel free to reach out to me to ask any additional questions you might have around this space. But we're launching our new Reconciliation Action Plan next month, and that's a significant piece of work which has been undertaken over the last 12 months to realign our Reconciliation Action Plan with core Bureau business, and that touches across all parts of the Bureau as well. So I'm really looking forward to rolling out that new RAP over the next 12 to 24 months. At the moment, we do have the First Nations office, so that's been in operation for over 12 months now, and that's the office that I lead. And that's not only to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff, but also to provide support across the Bureau, as well as different parts of the Bureau need to take advice around engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, or helping to realign products, for example. Then they're able to reach out and seek some advice and guidance on how best to do that as well. And I've talked about the new Reconciliation Action Plan as well. That's this, and you'll see on the slide there that's the new artwork that will be represented in the new RAP. So hopefully, in looking at that artwork, you might be able to see different parts of the Bureau represented as part of that artwork, and I'm really looking forward to being able to launch that new RAP in Reconciliation Week next month. So I'll stop there because I'm pretty sure I'm slightly over time with my section. But yeah, please do reach out should you have any questions around any of the diversity and inclusion or First Nations areas that have been touched on today. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Roland. I hope that gives everyone some of an insight and a bit of an overview of our graduate meteorologist program and the sort of careers that it can take you in. I'll now be inviting our presenters to answer some of your questions from throughout the session. So if you do have any, by all means, let us know. And if there is someone you want to ask a question of specifically, then we'll certainly try and answer that. So one of the ones that we've had so far, I think this one and a few others are for you, Mick. So are there any mid-year intakes, or are we only once a year?
At this point in time, because the course is 10 months in length, we only have an intake that's happening now, and the course begins in January.
Wonderful. And then on a similar line, can you just confirm, is part-time supported or just a kind of permanent full-time?
At this point in time, is full-time employed by the Bureau to study.
Wonderful. This one's probably a little more specific. This one's from Raymond. What would happen if a candidate was accepted but wasn't able to start on the exact first date, but instead were delayed by a week or two? Were they able to potentially start late and catch up, or is there potential for something there?
There's flexibility. It's going to depend upon personal circumstance, etc. But if someone's going to be delayed by a week or two for whatever circumstance, we can deal with that, and people can catch up. As I said earlier, lectures are recorded at the early parts of the course, so people settling in for interstate relocation, doing induction, and so on. That's something to discuss closer to the time of signing your contract.
Wonderful. In a similar vein, Bailey's got a question on whether or not the Bureau will assist with those initial relocations, and if so, what that starts to look like.
That will mean going through our HR team that's dealing with toll. We certainly do pay for people's relocations. That's all kind of handled for you. And you'll get more information on that again when you're signing a contract.
Thank you. And now, just for those of you who are still here, obviously, if we've got a number of questions that are still waiting to be asked, we'll try and answer a couple more, may go ever so slightly over time, but we'll do our best to wrap up within the hour. So Mick, another question for you. Coming from Paige, she said, my background is in aerospace engineering, so working in space weather sounds particularly interesting. Coming from the GradMet program, what's one pathway that you could end up working in that area?
I can't speak definitively, but anecdotally, I've known one of the past graduates who had a related background, an astrophysics background, and applied for a role when it came up. So it's like anything in the organisation. If a role comes up, it doesn't hurt to apply. If you've got the skill set for it, have a go. You won't know until you try.
Wonderful. Let's see what we've got here. Here we are. So this one's a question about previous study. Is there any previous study requirements for environmental science? One of our Q&As here is someone saying that they've majored in both physics and mathematics, but haven't necessarily got that environmental science side of things.
Absolutely no prerequisite to have studied meteorology or environmental science or climate. That might present a bit of a steep learning curve, as Grace pointed out. But if you've got the right tools in mathematics and physics, you're simply applying them to a new area of physics, if you like, which is what meteorology is. So there's zero expectation. I had a tiny bit, but it's certainly not required. We'd like you to demonstrate that you're interested in the field, but that doesn't have to be illustrated by having studied it prior.
Perfect. This one, I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong, but for Dean, is do we have to hold an Australian citizenship to apply? Currently a permanent resident, expecting to acquire citizenship later this year. So if he does acquire that citizenship between now and program starting, is that possible, or is it you have to be a citizen to apply?
It used to be PR and on the road to citizenship was acceptable. I think to get an offer of employment, you'll need to be a citizen, but that might be worth one flagging your application that the expectation is before you can sign off as opposed to when you start. But that's something for us to check with HR, the specifics of that, and that'll get caught as we're going through the application process. So do apply, see how those things land.
Thank you. Grace, this one's actually for you. Jack's asked, how often were you able to draw parallels between your astrophysics study and the work that you were doing in the GradMet program?
Yeah, interesting. Look, I think a lot of the skills that I developed on the path to astrophysics were very applicable. Like I mentioned, all that thermodynamics and waves and fluid mechanics. but it feels nice to study something that's a little bit closer to home and a bit more impactful for people in their day-to-day life. So I'd say it set me up very well, but I did have a very steep learning curve with learning, for example, what is a dew point? I don't think I really knew that before starting the course. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Grace. Now, there is one question here for Roland, which I'm actually probably going to answer on his behalf, about what's the best contact for him. For this particular course, anyone, if you can email any questions that you have after this, please contact the graduate mets at bom.gov.au. We'll have a slide at the very end of this where we'll bring that up on screen here. So if you do have any questions, by all means, please contact that. And if it is in relation to any affirmative measures or Indigenous information, then we'll make sure to get that to Roland, and then he'll be able to contact you directly. Couple more questions. Let me have a quick look what's come through. We've got one question here talking about how many people are roughly accepted into the program each year. I understand that that does fluctuate a little, but do you have a rough idea of class sizes for next year, Mick?
Oh, it's about 20 to 25, I think, is something like that. You're right, it does vary greatly from year to year. Grace's year was a very large course, but we're looking at about that number.
Lovely. And roughly when can candidates expect to hear outcomes of applications?
I might go back to that, or if I can jump to that table, the diagram that I presented earlier is on this slide here. So you can see that we hope between the periods of about June through August to be able to make verbal offers.
Excellent. Now, I might ask one last question. This one I think is also for you, Mick, but if a candidate is successful, can they look at postponing enrolment to the following year, or is it this year, this application, and then if you want to apply again next year, apply then?
It's a competitive process. People have to take the job offer for that year. So if you're unable to accept, you have to re-enter. Unfortunately, at this point in time, it's the way the process runs, and compete against the field in the following year.
Wonderful. Now it is coming up just past 2 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, so I think we'll call the webinar there. But thank you for everyone who's attended. We really appreciate having you there. A big thank you to all of the team, both presenting and supporting us underneath. So thank you all very much. We hope you enjoyed the session, and best of luck in your applications. Goodbye.